In this video, we are going to do some additional server configuration, some kind of final setup steps on the server just to make sure that we've got everything in place before we move on to installing Proton. So the first thing we're going to do is some updates to the server document. What we want to do is basically give our administrator rights to do the things that we want it to be able to do on the server. So first thing to confirm is in our list of groups, we have a local domain admins group, and the member of that group is our one user ID, which is the Domino administrator. So go in and make a copy of that group name, and then we'll go over to the servers view and we'll edit our server, and we'll make a couple of updates on the security side. So let's give ourselves the ability to do some stuff here. That's probably fine. This is probably not something we really need to worry about, but I like to put that in there anyway. What the heck? Let's give ourselves full rights. Okay, we're developers. We're developers with access to the administrative keys. Okay, access the server. We have all users listed in the directory and local domain servers. Create databases, local domain admins. Create new replicas, admins, master templates, admins. Trusted servers is going to be local domain servers. Again, notice the difference between local domain servers in these fields and then local domain admins. So local domain servers are these two, local domain admins are the rest. And we'll hit save and close. Okay, we can close out of here. Just a quick interruption here to actually explain why it is we're doing what we're doing right at this moment before we do it. We're going to install and configure the ID Vault and enable transaction logging on the Domino server. And we don't actually need to do this right now, but for later in the course when we get to the IAM section, which is the last section, configuring the ID Vault and enabling transaction logging is necessary, and I figured since we were here, let's do it now. So just to clarify, it isn't necessary for the first piece of what we're doing here, but it is necessary for later, so since we're here, we should do it. And just to point out, in the IAM section of the documentation under Domino configuration, here's where it explains setting up the ID Vault. And as we get a little bit further on, generating an IAM storage database, it talks about transaction logging being enabled. We're going to cover that later on in the course, so explain all of these steps and why we're doing them. But just understand that this is why we're doing this piece right now. Okay, let's get back to it. Next step then is to go into the Domino administrator client. So we'll launch that client, and depending on how things are set up, it may point to the local server first, and of course we want to run on our server, so choose open server and put in whatever your server name is, and now you can double check that we're pointed at the right server. So the first thing that we're going to do is enable an ID Vault, and for that you need to be on the configuration tab. Just double check. You may be by default first on the people and groups tab or whatever tab. Anyway, come on over to the configuration tab, and then over on this side under tools we have ID Vaults, and we want to create an ID Vault. This is just an informative screen. Actually, at this point it's probably worth pausing because I've got some documentation I want to share. So HCL has done a good job of transitioning the documentation, the product documentation for all of their tools into their site. And of course, one of those tools is what we know and love is Domino. And when you click on Domino, we've got documentation for the last 3 releases, Domino 11. And this is basically all of the documentation that we get in the, if we go back here, let me just hit cancel there for a second. If we head over to our notes client, we've got the Domino administrator documentation that people are probably very familiar with. This is the online version of that documentation. And the piece that we want to pay attention to here is we've got a documentation on creating an ID Vault. So we're following these pretty much step by step, all of the documentation that's here. So just pay attention to that. I'm going to close this. And there's the URL for you. And okay, let's come back over to our Domino administrator. And let's create an ID vault. Okay, so what is the ID vault name? You can call it whatever you want. The one thing that I would recommend is to have no spaces. So in our case, we're going to say C3UG underscore vault. And in this particular case, it's optional, so we don't need to worry about this too much. It says it'll also be our Notes ID Vault database title. So I'll tell you what, let's do this. C3UG ID Vault. Okay. Next, we're going to use our favorite, very unsecure password that we're sharing with everything. And the vault file location, you can put it wherever you want. In fact, you could probably just leave it the default. This is going to be on the local hard drive. So this is not on the server, this is on the local hard drive. The vault server, we want it to be our only server that's here, so that's good to carry on. And we want this administrator to be the one that can manage the ID vault. If that's blank, just hit the add or remove there, and this is your available user. So make sure that that's in there. And then the next screen is the organizations or organizational units. So you can break ID vaults down by organizational unit. That's for the brainy administrators in the crowd. Us as developers, let's just leave it at the top level and move along. Okay, this is specify the names that are authorized to reset passwords. We definitely want our Domino administrator in here, and when you select the Domino administrator, also come down and tick this box that says password reset agent authority, and that changes the icon there to give the administrator full rights. We're going to create a new policy assigned to an organization, and we're going to select our organization, and we're good to go there. Make sure you click on it so that it is ticked. And then we've got a message that's going to be displayed to a user that forgets their passwords. So all right. Having some fun there. Okay, and the final configuration is done, and we say create vault. And oh, look at that. I went ahead and did this already. So normally you wouldn't get this message. Yes, we're going to replace it and save. Choose a certifier for C3UG. This certifier in my particular case happens to be, okay, come on. C drive. Notes C3UG, and there's our certifier ID. So you need to choose your certifier ID wherever it ended up being saved. And we put in the password, which in our case matches all the rest of the passwords that we've put in. Final setup. Now, you've got the copy to clipboard here. If you want to copy to clipboard and then paste it out to a text file, for example. So let's do that. Notepad, or whatever your favorite text editor happens to be. We will say file, save. And let's actually put this into our notes, C3UG. So this is ID Vault setup result. And we can close that, and we are done. Okay, so that's the ID Vault section. The next section is we're going to set up transaction logging. To set up transaction logging, we need to go back to the server document. So let's switch back to the Notes client. And again, administrators are going to have a little bit of a freak out there because I could have edited the server document in the administration client, but I like to do it through the name and address book. Old school. Okay, and we have a transaction logging tab in our server document. First step is we want to enable transaction logging. It's highly recommended that you place the log files on a separate drive. Do you want to accept the default path relative to your data directory? Well, this is a sandbox and we're only creating a single VM, so this is non-production. This particular message, of course, is recommending what you do in a production environment. We're going to just say yes and let it go right into the local drive. Important to understand, basically you can accept all of these defaults. It says use all available space on the log device. Well, clearly we don't want to chew up all of the drive space that we've allocated to our tiny little CentOS server VM. So yes, we very much do not want to use all available space for our logging. And we can say what's the maximum log space. So call it 500 megs is fine. And then the rest of the settings are fine. Again, if we want to go back to our documentation, we've got setting up transactional logging on our Domino server, and all of this is explained in detail in the documentation. And this is the URL. Again, if we go back to just the standard page here, there's a great search feature. Pretty much any term that you want to search for in the documentation is going to give you some results here. So if you do end up getting twisted around or what have you, this is the best place to come back to. Okay, so the documentation is there, the setting is fine, and let's hit save and close. So the server is going to close, and we can come back to the front of our notes client here. Now, one other thing that I want to do, and then we'll reboot the server, and then we will be done. So we're back to our Domino client here. The console is closed, which is fine. I'm actually going to, I'm sorry, this is our Domino server. I'm going to, let's clear the screen. We're going to bring down the server. So let's do that. Domino stop. We're going to edit putting in the password. We're going to edit the notes ini file. And the only thing we're going to do here is we're going to put a setting in that forces new databases to be created with the latest ODS version. For those of you not familiar with that, ODS stands for on disk structure, and we always want to put in the setting in the notes ini file. This is just a best practice to make sure that new databases are created with the latest and greatest ODS version. The reason for that is that the efficiency of the Domino server gets impacted by running too many databases that are set with an older version of the ODS. So it's always a best practice when you upgrade your server to a new version to make sure you go back and double check your databases and make sure that they're running the latest and greatest ODS. But we can go into the notes ini and put a setting in here that's going to make sure that we force things into the latest ODS. Now the current latest ODS, here let's get to /local/notes data, and we should have a notes.ini in here. Yes, we do. Let's go vi notes.ini, and let's go again I to insert. And this is all just default settings since we've installed our database earlier today. So the setting that we want to do here is create _r10 _databases equals 1. Now, the reason this is R10 is that the latest ODS for version 11 happens to be ODS 53, which was introduced for version 10. There wasn't a change between version 10 and version 11. So leaving this at create _R10 _databases does set you to the latest ODS version, again, ODS 53. So simply putting that in, press escape to go out of insert mode, again, :WQ, and we save our changes. Okay, our Domino server is stopped, and what we want to do now is reboot our server. So I'm going to, in order to reboot, we need to be the root user. So we're going to change to root, put our root password in, and then we can just simply say reboot now. And that's going to reboot our server. So when the virtual machine reboots, Domino is going to kick in. All of those settings that we've just turned on will be enabled, and we'll be able to run from here. This is the end of the first section of the course for the setup of the Domino server. Let's log in as notes, and we can say Domino console, and we can see our server set up and running. Now, if you want to, you can go in and double check that those settings are turned on, but trust me, they're turned on. So again, this is the end of our first section. What I would suggest we do now actually is make a snapshot. So whatever virtual machine software you're using, now would be a good time to make a snapshot of your server so that as we go forward, if there's anything that decides to go sideways, we can roll back to this point and be able to carry on from there. And that is experience speaking. As I was preparing for this course, ran into that problem a few times. So as a best practice, I would suggest you take a snapshot here. We'll wrap up this video and this section, and we'll come back in a new section and we will install Proton. So we will talk to you in the next video.